The American president says his people are being ripped off by other nations, including us. So much for that special relationship we keep talking about. Mr. Trump's tariffs fell on friend and foe alike, and also on the penguins of the Heard and McDonald Islands. Britain's Oval Office diplomacy may have paid dividends. With the EU being hit twice as hard, you might even call it the Brexit dividend. Kemi Badenoch made friends with the American vice president over free speech. They may not see eye to eye on free trade. For the government, we'll be joined by Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones. And we'll speak to the leader of the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch. How will Europe respond to Donald Trump's tariffs? I'll ask Germany's man in London, Ambassador Miguel Berger. And we'll be joined by someone who knows more than a thing or two about global trade negotiations, the UK chief negotiator until just a few months ago, Sir Crawford Falconer. Plus, with us throughout the show, former Education Secretary Gillian Keegan, former Shadow Health Secretary Jonathan Ashworth, and former Green Party leader Caroline Lucas. Welcome to Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. This morning, our Prime Minister writes in a national newspaper that the world as we knew it has gone. The new world is less governed by established rules and more by deals and alliances. Stripped of its formality, this is a brutal statement of realpolitik that wouldn't be out of place in a movie about the mafia. Pretty astonishing from a politician who made his mark as a lawyer defending the international human rights framework. But like everyone else in the world, Keir Starmer's still working out what to do about Donald Trump, who it seems has no inhibitions when it comes to wielding his nation's immense military and economic power. Most observers assume that the Prime Minister went to the White House with a mission to moderate Mr. Trump's methods. It seems he may have returned, having adopted some of them. We too are learning the art of the deal. All that said, for the moment, we haven't gone full gangster. Contrary to our European neighbours, faced with 10% import tariffs, the government isn't returning fire, for the moment at least. But the Prime Minister makes it clear in his article, all options remain on the table. A little earlier, I spoke to Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones. Darren Jones, is there anything beyond that which we've been reporting on Sky News that you can tell us about the suspension of the Labour MP Dan Norris?
No. Clearly we're all shocked and personally saddened by the serious allegations that have been made. It's right that the Labour Party suspended the whip immediately when the police informed the party of Dan Norris's arrest. But as the police have said, this is a sensitive investigation and we shouldn't be commenting further at this stage.
Thank you. Well, there's another story that's coming overnight. What does the government know now about deportation of 2 Labour MPs from Israel?
So we know that there were 2 Labour MPs who were on a parliamentary delegation to Israel who, for reasons I'm not aware of at this stage, were held at the airport on arrival. They're now on the way home to the United Kingdom, but the Foreign Secretary has spoken to his counterpart in the Israeli government overnight to say that clearly it's unacceptable for British members of Parliament on a parliamentary delegation to be detained in that way.
As far as we know, that they were part of a delegation, so presumably the others went through. Is there anything that we know about these 2 particular MPs that might suggest why they would have been picked out?
I don't know at this stage, I'm afraid, Trevor. Maybe more details will become available when my colleagues return back into the UK later today.
All right, well, let's talk about your own territory, which is the economy and so on. In less than 24 hours, the financial markets open in London. Following Mr. Trump's actions this week, what is your message to the markets?
Well, look, as the Prime Minister, the Chancellor, the whole of the government has shown, even when there's a lot going on in the world, and we've seen the world changing rapidly in recent recent months. The UK is a stable country with a clear policy and a strong government, and we will always act in the interest of the British people and the British economy, and we'll do so in a calm-headed and considered way. We've been very clear a trade war is in no one's interests. Evidently, things are happening in the world that we can't control, but we're going to do everything we can to make sure that the UK is in as strong and resilient a place as it can be.
Well, the Prime Minister's written in the national newspaper this morning an op-ed which could be summed up as keep calm and carry on. But actually, we heard that Jaguar Land Rover has decided to halt exports to the largest market, the United States of America. They employ, I think, tens of thousands of people here. Surely this needs a little bit more than, don't worry, it'll get sorted out.
To be fair to the Prime Minister, his op-ed, I think, in the Telegraph you're referring to, Trevor, was more than just keep calm and carry on. It's important that we keep calm and do these things in a sensible way. But the Prime Minister's op-ed today was very clear that he thinks globalisation has failed in the current context and that we need to go further and faster in supporting British industry and the British economy. And he'll be saying more about that this week. But I think it's clear that over the last week and the last few months in government, whether it's the Prime Minister, the Chancellor, the Business Secretary, the whole of government, we've been engaging closely with businesses to make sure that we can understand what we can do to support them and support British industry and British jobs.
Oh, so we can expect a definitive or a definite response to the Trump tariffs this week from our government?
There'll be further announcements from the Prime Minister this week on support for British business, building off of the engagement that we've been having with them over the last weeks and months.
So there will be a response?
The Prime Minister will be saying more later this week, yeah.
Well, let's talk about what the Prime Minister said. And I'm going to quote the only authority who knows what's in the Prime Minister's mind, because they've been talking. The President of the United States says that our Prime Minister is, I'm quoting here, happy with the way the UK was treated on tariffs. Is that right?
Keir has been clear that he is unhappy about the tariffs and broadly unhappy about...
the President's got it wrong?
Broadly unhappy about, tariffs in what was a well-functioning global trading system. I suspect what's being referred to there is the fact that the United Kingdom had the lowest tariff and puts us in a much stronger position than other complex, large economies, which we think was a vindication of our engagement with the United States in the run-up to the President's announcements. But clearly, we don't like tariffs. We're not happy about that. We're now negotiating this economic deal because we would like to be in a better
This is all a bit, I say tomato, you say tomato, isn't it? The President says that the Prime Minister is happy. You're telling me the Prime Minister is unhappy.
Well, look, I don't speak for the President of the United States. I can speak on behalf of the Prime Minister and the government. And as I said, as we've said publicly, we're not happy about the tariff situation, but we do think we're in a better place than other countries at this starting point. We're going to continue to negotiate on that economic deal and get the best deal for Britain.
Well, let's talk about those negotiations. Your colleagues have been coming into studio for weeks and weeks, and they've been nodding mysteriously every time I ask them about this possibility of a trade deal with the United States, hinting we might be made an exception. Well, there was no exception this week. How's this trade deal going?
Well, it's ongoing, and I have to break it to you. I can't give you a running commentary on what's in it, what's not in it.
I'm not asking for a running commentary, just asking, when are we going to get one?
Well, you may have more mysterious nodding. I mean, the good news is our negotiators have been in a very strong position from the start because they had been negotiating with our American counterparts way in advance of the tariffs coming into force. We've already got a strong relationship with the United States, as you know, a balanced trading relationship, but there's things we can go further on. That's in the interest of the British economy and the American economy, and that's what our negotiators are currently doing.
Well, look, I mean, this whole strong relationships thing, most countries this week got the same treatment as we did. Brazil, Armenia, Burundi, Niger. None of them's got a king to offer a state visit. Iran, Afghanistan, the USA is pretty much in a permanent standoff with those two. They all got 10%. Where's this confidence that you have that we've got some special thing that's going to produce a great deal?
Well, our relationship is very different with the United States to all of those countries, whether it's on security and
yeah, but the point of the outcome is the same.
Or trade, the trade surplus we have with the United States. We're a large, complex economy, one of the richest economies in the world. And actually, if you were to compare the UK to other similar countries, you'll see that we had a better starting deal. But as I say, we don't...
But I don't have to. We all got 10%. They didn't treat us any differently.
European Union, 20%, China, 36%. Other large, complex economies, wealthy nations were treated differently. But as I say, we don't say this with any glee. We're not happy about the tariff situation. We don't think it's good for global trade or the global economy, but it does just represent the facts. And now we need to get on and try and get this deal over the line with the United States and to be able to move on.
The point I'm just really trying to get at is there's a lot of, I won't say triumphalism, but happiness, to use today's word, the word du jour, that the Oval Office business, the dinners that the Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary had with Mr. Trump, there's a lot of coming back and telling people like me that this is going to be great for us. But in the end, all the bowing and scraping, all the offers of dinners and all the rest of it made absolutely no difference.
I don't think that's true. I think the facts are very clearly to the counter of the argument. And look, there's a good thing that the United Kingdom has a good working relationship with the United States, as we do with the European Union and other allies around the world. It's a good thing that the Prime Minister has struck up a good relationship.
About Iran, they still got 10%.
Well, it's a good thing that our Prime Minister, which is also very different to that situation, has a good relationship with the President of the United States of America. It's always worked well for us as a country when we use our diplomacy and our ability to be able to influence the world and shape the world in our interest as best as we can, and that's what the Prime Minister and the government is doing.
All right, well, let me put this from the other side of this question, perhaps. You'd obviously preferred if there's no tariffs, but would you accept that Brexit has in fact protected us from the 20% hit being faced by the EU? You've mentioned it already this morning.
We've been treated differently to the European Union. That's correct.
That's part of the Brexit. That's a Brexit dividend.
It is. There's one. I've struggled to find one in the past, but there is one. We've ended up with lower tariffs.
It's a pretty big one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's good. But look, what we're not going to do is pick or kind of trade off the United States to the European Union. And I've already talked about our relationship with the United States. We know that's important and works well. But so is our relationship with the European Union on trade, on energy, but increasingly on security. And I think it's the right strategic decision for the UK, especially in this world that's chopping and changing around, that we have those strong bridges into the European Union and into the United States. And that's what we're working to deliver.
Well, this is a very interesting point, isn't it? I mean, I understand the Prime Minister's been on the phone to other European leaders over the last 24, 48 hours. You might want to tell us what he's been hearing from them. But essentially, he's promoted this idea of the UK as a bridge between the United States and Europe. But in the end, the Americans, for example, have insisted that any trade deal, we need to accept their chlorinated chicken. The EU has always insisted that we shouldn't touch the stuff. At some point, we are going to have to choose.
Yeah, and we're not going to lower food standards in the UK. I mean, I think we're pretty clear about that. But look, as I say, it's a good thing that we have a good working relationship with our allies. It's a good thing that the United Kingdom can have these
deals here. I
mean, whether it's on trade or whether it's on...
We're not talking about whether we're nice to each other. At some point, somebody's got to sign.
This is diplomacy.
We're going to do this or we're going to do that.
Trevor, this is diplomacy. It's important. It's important that we have good working relationships like we do with the EU and the US. We'll continue to build on that, including with other trading partners and allies around the world. I think it's good that Britain is in a confident, forward-leaning position, fighting for the British economy, but also doing that diplomatic work, coordinating allies across the world on some of these issues. I think people at home like it when Britain can stand up tall in the world and be able to fight for our values and our interests.
Well, what I'm hearing here is a cabinet minister essentially saying that we'd love to do some deal with the United States, but it looks like in the end we are going to have to get closer to Europe. So Jaguar Land Rover, OK, maybe the United States is over for a while. They're going to have to retilt towards the European Union.
Be clear, I think we can get a good deal on both sides.
You can't both have chlorinated chicken and not have chlorinated chicken.
And I've been really clear that we are not having chlorinated chicken in the UK. So we can, but that doesn't mean we can't do...
no deal with the US?
But that doesn't mean we can't do a deal on technology, on energy, on security.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Are we going to kill off the digital tax?
As I say, the negotiators are in the room right now talking about
Is that on the table?
These issues. I'm not going to give a running list.
Is a digital tax on the table?
I'm not going to give a running list about what's being talked about one way or the other than to say, as I've done, that like the chlorinated chicken accusation is not one that that stands up, because we've been clear about our standards on that. But look, our negotiators are out there negotiating with the Americans. We've also got our counterparts talking with our partners in the European Union. Over time, I think we'll have some more detail coming out from that, and we'll be able to come back and show you the benefits of all of that work.
It sounds like pretty much everything's on the table in the United States, except possibly the chicken. But anyway, let's come back home. How many jobs do you estimate are going to be lost as a consequence of your national insurance rise that takes effect this week?
So let's just step back. What is the national insurance rise that's taking effect this week? We increased employer national insurance contributions at the budget last year. We had to do that to get a grip of the public finances from what we'd inherited from the Conservatives, and we chose to protect workers so that they don't pay more on their pay slips. Importantly, we designed the system in a way to try to protect smaller businesses, because we know that paying additional tax like this is not welcome. No one likes to pay more tax, right? And so over 50% of businesses in the UK will pay the same or less than they did before. So the impact on jobs, to answer your question, for smaller and medium-sized businesses will be a lower burden because we've protected them more in the system. Over 50% pay the same or less than they did before. Bigger businesses, those that have got maybe national chains or large employee bases, will have to pay more. But that, I think, in the circumstances, was the best trade-off that we had at the budget last year.
You think is the best trade-off? I mean, we could have a discussion about
the alternatives.
We could have a discussion about the impacts on smaller companies, and bear in mind that they also are going to have some problems anyway. But the bigger companies are already saying that they're going to have to trim jobs. Nick McKenzie, who's the boss of the pub chain Green King, turns over $2 billion a year, employs 40,000 people. He said yesterday that they're trimming their investment plans to pay for your increases in minimum wage, national insurance and business rates. This is not the Tories. This is you. So much for your growth plans.
Well, growth was projected up at the forecast in year 2, 3, 4 and 5, with a projection of disposable income.
The OBR just cut the growth forecasts in half.
For 1 year, 25, 26, and they forecast it up in 26, 27, 27, 28, 29.
The 1 year is the year that we've got best visibility.
But we've got to be really clear, right? What the OBR said was that the decisions that we're taking as a government will increase the size of the UK economy and stimulate growth and improve people's disposable income. Look, as I said, I recognise that for employers that are having to pay more national insurance contributions, they would rather have that money to spend on other things. But we've had to take a decision in the country's interests where we were able to protect workers, our promise in the manifesto at the election, but we needed to get a grip of public spending. And as a consequence of that, we've been able to reduce NHS waiting lists every single month for the last 5 months as a direct consequence of our investment in public services. That is good for the economy because people who are sick and maybe can't be back to work are being made better and able to go back to work. That's good in the round.
Let me just, if I may, finally show you something which we're coming up to local elections, and your leader promised higher standards of politics and integrity and all the rest of it. I just want to share this with you because I saw it last night. This is the Labour Party's latest poster attacking reform and the Tories. There's nothing unlawful about it, but it's distasteful, isn't it?
Why?
I think that the overlay of these two people's faces seems to me unpleasant.
Why?
It just seems unpleasant to me. You think this is OK?
I think what it's showing is that you've got Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Reform Party and the leader of the Conservatives, who essentially are one and the same thing. They're having these arguments on the right of British.
Are saying Farage and Badenoch are the same thing?
They're fighting in the same space on the populist right. I mean, I think that's pretty clear. And that's all we're saying. At this election, whether you're voting Reform or Conservative, essentially you're voting for the populist right. I don't think that's the right choice for this country, and that's what we're saying to people with that poster.
Darren Jones, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Pleasure.
Let's see what our panel made of all that. We're joined all morning by the former Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, the former Health Secretary, Jonathan Ashworth, and former Shadow Health Secretary, I should say, Jonathan, beg your pardon, and the former Green Party leader and President of the European Movement, Caroline Lucas. Let's talk about the Trump tariffs. Gillian, is the government being calm or is it being complacent?
I think it is it's the right thing to do to not retaliate right now where we are. Others will take on that battle. I mean, there's a few things that are going to happen. You know, the question is what is going to happen as a result of this oversimplistic blanket formula that's been put in. And you mentioned friend or foe, by the way. There were some foes that didn't get any tariffs. Don't forget, Russia, Belarus, Cuba and North Korea are tariff-free. So if we're judging friendships on tariff levels...
is that they're not doing any trade with Russia because there's sanctions.
Yes, well, I think there probably are some trades between them, but and it doesn't mention the others. But, you know, there'll be a few things that happen. First is what happens in the US. So we've seen what happens to the stock market. There'll be consumers, the courts. There's some actions in the courts as well. And there'll also be Congress, potentially. So there's that. Then you've got individual deals. So will some people try to do individual deals? Obviously, that's the strategy of the UK to try and close that trade deal, which has been on the table for a while. And obviously, the Conservatives took quite a long way until Biden got in. And then there is the worst of all worlds, which is coordinated retaliation. And that is the thing that, you know, will really escalate the global trade war. And all of those things, as far as I can see, you know, could play their role, because this is a very disruptive approach. It doesn't offer solutions. It doesn't offer reforms. It's a disruptive approach. And, you know, with a disruptive approach, apart from blowing up the stock market, many other things could happen, and the ripple effect could be quite profound.
Jonathan, I'm sure that you think that the government's probably doing the right thing, as Gillian does, but Trump's got every right to do this. He's elected. This is his mandate. We knew what was coming.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, in fact, Donald Trump has been talking about this for 30-odd years. But the reality is, this is a seismic moment. The rule-based order has been completely upended. It's why Keir Starmer, in his article in The Telegraph today, is absolutely right to talk about old assumptions no longer applying. And we've got to think about how we deliver strength abroad and security at home in this new era. Now, a beggar my neighbour, mercantilism approach to trade wars is not in our interests. It's going to put the global economy in the doldrums. That is going to hit us. So we need to look at the measures we can take domestically to strengthen our economy. Yes, that involves reforming planning so we can get building. It means a more modern, interventionist industrial strategy. It means looking at the areas where we have an advantage and see how we can support those areas to thrive even further. But these are going to be really, really choppy waters, and it's going to be like nothing we have seen economically in our lifetimes.
Caroline, I'm not teasing you here, but does it make you rethink? I mean, you're president of the European movement. You're one of the strongest advocates of Remain. Does it make you think that actually, maybe inadvertently, we've benefited from Brexit?
I just can't believe that you're asking me that question in all seriousness. You know, because if we were still part of the EU, we would be so much better off. Leaving the EU is costing us around 5%.
Tariff.
Yes, leaving the EU cuts our GDP by about 5%. This tariff, unwelcome as it undoubtedly is, scenarios are suggesting will have an impact on our GDP of between 0.1 and 0.3% of 1%. So the cost to us of leaving the EU has been massively greater. The truth is that we are now basically facing a double whammy, not only being out of the EU and therefore facing all of the trade friction as a result of that, and it's been estimated around £100 billion a year lost to us because of having left the EU. And, of course, this wonderful special relationship which we're supposed to have with the US, as you've just been saying, is no better than islands with a whole load of penguins on it. You know, we have not got this special relationship which is delivering the benefits that we were promised. So we are out in the cold. And what we should be doing is making closer links with our EU allies. I was disappointed to hear Darren not talking about that. I think we are stronger together, to coin a phrase, and that's what we should be doing now.
Do you think, Jonathan, that Darren was basically saying, we can manage to reach a relationship with both the EU and the United States, which is equitable and makes everybody happy. Do you think that's realistic?
Well, you know, you've got to deal with the circumstances as they are presented with you. And this country had a debate about our membership of the EU, and it settled it. I was a Remainer. I didn't want us to leave the EU, but we are where we are. So we've got to work out how we now navigate this new world. And the right approach is the approach that Keir Starmer is setting out, look where you can get deals and arrangements and agreements with the US, and do what you can with other countries.
Here. We can have both. We can have both at the same time.
Well, we're going to have a bit of cakeism. And by the way, lots of politicians want cakeism, not just Boris Johnson.
I think Starmer is going to have a lot of splinters in his bum, quite honestly, from sitting on that fence so uncomfortably. We do need to make some choices.
Sitting on the fence, though. It's trying to get a deal with the US and an agreement, and get deals and agreements with other countries.
But there are going to be big choices, and I think we should be really careful of what we wish for with that trade agreement, because I think it is sure that there are going to be big impacts when it comes to agriculture, and what's that going to mean for our UK farmers? Yes, but we also know that farming is going to be in it. Agriculture is the big wish from the US.
He said not, though, didn't he? Darren said very emphatically no chlorinated chicken. Well, now, maybe there'll be more than just chlorinated chicken. I think
there's more things to worry about than chlorinated chicken.
We should look at the detail of that.
Absolutely.
Gillian, do you think that, Darren's basically saying that somehow we will be able to find a place in which this now famous position of being the bridge between the United States and the EU works for us. Do you agree?
I'm not sure that that's going to be the role we play, because we don't know the way the EU are going to retaliate yet on tariffs, and it could be that we go a different direction. If we've got a trade deal, then, they'll have their own discussions to be had. It really does depend what's in that trade deal, and it really does matter what's in that trade deal. But in terms of what Jonathan said about the double whammy, I fear that businesses here have already had a massive hit from the budget. £25 billion has hit our businesses here. This is on top of that. This is on top of what was already a huge problem. So we've got an incoherent strategy with the growth mission and then hitting businesses, and we've got an incoherent trade strategy for Donald Trump, which I'm not sure what he's trying to achieve with it. There could be several things, and I'm not sure whether he will achieve.
And let's be clear as well that this trade deal isn't going to protect us from the global dislocation of trade that's going to be happening, and supply chains, exactly. Yeah. So I maintain the case that we should be stronger with our EU allies and worrying slightly less about
the reality is, of course, that the events of this week have pretty much knocked Rachel Reeves's sums out of the park. I mean, it's not her fault, but it's made the predictions or forecasts, I beg your pardon, on which she relied pretty unreliable.
Of course it has. We're a relatively open, free trading nation. This is going to, as I say, send the global economy into the doldrums. That is going to affect us. It's going to affect our fiscal position. There is also another factor in this. We're forgetting that this is going to hurt working people in America as well.
Yes.
It's going to drive inflationary pressures. It's going to hit their economy. So I just wonder that when the rubber hits the road on that over there, whether the Trump administration may end up changing its position, but we will see.
The best way for it to influence the Americans themselves, the working people in the US, would be if they get some retaliation from us. That is what's going to concentrate their minds, not trying to do some deals behind closed doors.
China's retaliation will probably do that job.
I'm here. Yeah. Jonathan, just one quick thing.
Yeah.
She's going to have to come back for more tax rises, isn't she, Rachel Reeves?
Well, she's going to have to come back and explain at the budget how she's going to make the sums add up. She's already increased tax on business to fund the National Health Service, and if Gillian and her colleagues don't support that tax rise, they've got to tell us where the money would come from to fund the expansion of healthcare in this country, which has already seen waiting lists come down 3 or 4 months in a row.
We wouldn't agree with the pay rises that were above inflation.
I don't think nurses should be getting a decent pay. Typical Tories.
Above inflation.
This is way too lively for me.
Tories.
Thank you.
Want to hammer our nurses.
What are you doing?
Caroline.
Wait. I am getting fed up with the number of times that both Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves keep saying the world has changed. It has changed. Absolutely it's changed. So why doesn't she then also change her self-imposed fiscal rules that are causing so much damage? Why doesn't she look at that again, just as Germany has done? Why doesn't she look at things like a wealth tax? We are now in new waters, and the idea that we just keep doing the same thing is just crazy. The idea that we balance the books on the backs of the poor, which is exactly what Rachel Reeves is doing, the cuts to disability, the freezing of universal credit. This is coming from a Labour government. This is really shameful.
Quick response from both of you. Should she melt the ironclad fiscal
Well,
rules?
the problem with that is because this lot in the Tory party left us with so much borrowing and left us so in the red.
Even the OBR
we
have
cannot.
dismissed this.
They've estimated more borrowing under the last year of you lot. So because they left us with such sickly public finances, it's very difficult to change the fiscal rules.
Gillian, would you...
First of all, politicians need to take responsibility for their own decisions, and they need to have an honest conversation about that. You know, there are difficult decisions to be made, and we do have more difficult decisions, even without what's happening in trade. We have very difficult decisions around our demography, around many other things, and we do need to tackle some of the bigger issues. But what you cannot do is make stupid decisions, make growth your mission, clobber all the people who provide growth. Governments do not provide growth, businesses do. Clobber them all of that impact, and then sit back and be surprised when your tiny little bit of headroom disappears. It will disappear continually because it's a stupid strategy.
OK, more fun in a moment, but it is 9 o'clock. You're watching Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. In the last hour, Darren Jones has told this programme that the Prime Minister will say more in the coming week on supporting British business in response to the United States tariffs. The Chief Secretary of the Treasury said that the Prime Minister is unhappy about the tariffs and is in a strong negotiating position with the United States. Well, there's lots more to come this morning. Any moment now, we'll hear from the Conservative Party leader, Kemi Badenoch. And we'll ponder if, how and when the EU could retaliate against President Trump's tariffs with Germany's ambassador to the UK, Miguel Berger. And we'll get a sense of what's going on behind the scenes in Whitehall with the UK's former chief trade negotiator, Sir Crawford Falconer. OK, the local elections are now less than 4 weeks away. While many contests will be decided on local issues, it's always an important moment on the national level too. The Conservatives may be expecting a tough night after a very strong showing in the corresponding raft of elections 4 years ago. Now they face the threat of reform to their right. Nigel Farage's party has won over a lot of Tory voters. And I was joined earlier by the Conservative Party leader, Kemi Badenoch. Kemi Badenoch, what should the government be saying to the Israelis about the 2 deported MPs?
Well, I don't know those 2 MPs. They are relatively new MPs just elected last year. But I think that every country should be able to control its borders. And that's what Israel is doing, as far as I understand. They gave reasons why they didn't believe that those people should come in based on their laws. And it's really important that we respect other countries enforcing their borders. Those Labour MPs, according to the Israelis, were coming in to do something that they were not allowed to do. And so I respect that decision.
It does seem a bit odd, though. I mean, it's quite unusual. Apparently they're going as part of a delegation.
Well, I don't know the details of what it was they were going to do there, but I do observe Labour MPs in Parliament, as well as the 6 independent MPs who were elected, many of them on the Muslim vote, and so on, around the issues based on the Middle East. And I am very concerned about a lot of the rhetoric. There is a lot of repeating of misinformation, repeating of conspiracy theories. I see Labour MPs standing up and saying things which even Keir Starmer has to, disagree with and shut down a Prime Minister's questions. So I'm not surprised.
OK. Let's talk about the big news of the week, tariffs and the economy. Is the government right not to retaliate in kind?
Certainly, as a first response, that is the correct thing to do. Retaliatory tariffs just escalate trade wars. And we have to think about what is right for our national interest. If you're a business and you're now facing tariffs on your exports, the last thing you want is to have to pay tariffs on your imports. The people who pay tariffs are the people in those countries, because it means that the cost of their inputs become more expensive, the cost of their purchases become more expensive. And right now, what we need is to try and make life easier for people in this country. Labour has raised taxes, the economy is being crushed, inflation is up, growth is down, it's just 1%. We need to make sure that the decisions that are happening are the ones that make life easier for people, not worse.
Are you going to be saying to your good friend, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, that Mr. Trump has just got it wrong on this one?
I've been very public about saying this. I think that this is the wrong decision. And I think that tariffs, where they are for specific reasons, time limited, we've seen this happen even during the Reagan administration with Japan. It makes sense. As Trade Secretary, we had tariffs that we would impose if other countries were dumping or subsidizing. Those are within the rules of the WTO. But this sort of indiscriminate use of tariffs is just going to make the whole world poorer. And right now, what the world needs is stability and certainty.
Okay, well, that's clear. Let's return to the government's economic steps recently. When the DWP Secretary Liz Kendall announced her welfare reforms, your colleague Helen Whately responded by saying that she should have gone further. She said, spending more on sickness benefits than we do on defence is not the sign of a strong country. Now, this is quite an interesting and definitive position. Would you cut the amount that we pay out on sickness benefits so it's always lower than the defence budget? Is that a rule of thumb for you?
I think we need to look at what we are spending on defence, first of all, at a time when the world is becoming more dangerous. We need to raise more money. We need to spend more of it on defence. The way we raise the money is by growing the economy. Right now, we are in a weakened state because the decisions that Labour has made have made things worse. They do need to tackle welfare spending, and this is what the point that Helen is making. It's not about whether we should spend more on benefits or on sickness benefits. We need to make sure that we've got a strong and healthy population. We should not have so many people off work who are unwell and unable to work that it costs more than we spend on defence spending. That's just outrageous.
But I think I understand that, but it's a moment of clarity, isn't it? If what she is saying, as I interpret it, that if you look at the departmental budgets and you see that our spending on welfare benefits is higher than defence, that is a bad thing.
It is.
And an objective of government policy should be to rebalance that so that we are spending more on defence and security, defence of the realm, than we are on welfare benefits. That's an interesting and clear position to take.
I don't think it's a controversial one. We want a strong and healthy
Well, I think
population.
for lots of people it would be very controversial. It would mean a shift of tens of billions.
Well, we used to spend a lot more on defence than we did on welfare. You look decades ago when we had an economy where GDP was higher, where inflation was lower, we were not spending this amount on welfare. We need a country where more and more people are able to work and able to be productive. I don't think that is controversial.
Would one way of doing that be, for example, to be tougher on the tests around mental illness, which, of course, has been the single greatest contributor to the rise in disability benefits over the last decade or so? Or would you take that out of the system altogether?
Well, why don't we start from first principles? What is the purpose of welfare? It's to make sure that those people who absolutely cannot work are looked after. So those who are genuinely disabled, permanently disabled, unable to work for whatever reason, are looked after. That's the purpose of it. But it cannot be the case that we now have, as one statistic showed, 1 in 4 people in our country disabled. That cannot be right. If that is the case, then it means that there are many people who are falling into that category who need to be moved out of that category and helped into work. Whether it's with illness, whether it's mental health, let's find out what's going on and tackle that. Those were the plans that we had in place just before the last election. Labour changed those plans, but as we can see, because they've made mistakes, because the economy is worsening, they're now having to look in areas that they didn't want to before. That is welfare. And as Helen says, they're not going far enough. I think they're scared, they're worried. They don't think that they have the votes for it within their parliamentary party. But as the opposition, our job is to make sure that we show Labour what the right course of action is.
But there are different ways of doing this. You could say, what we're going to do is we're going to put a lot more money into making people well. Or you could say, as I think Helen Whately appeared to be saying, that what we need to do is to redefine the categories, perhaps to go back to an earlier kind of definition that means that some people who currently fall into definition of disability no longer do so.
We need to look at welfare across the board. We have said that we're going to have policy commissions where we will examine what's going on and come out with new policy. But right now, Labour is in charge, they need to look at how they can cut that bill. Because at the end of the day, we are borrowing money to pay for welfare. We are spending more on debt interest, not the debt interest, than we are on education or defence. That is not sustainable. And whatever we can do in order to bring that welfare bill down in a sustainable way that doesn't harm those people who are genuinely disabled is something that I'm in support of.
All right, look, as you rightly say, you're not in government. You can't do very much about lots of things.
But we can say what the right thing to do is. Yes.
And also, you can say something about who and what you are, what kind of Conservative you want to be. It's evident that you're not exactly Mr. Trump's type of Conservative. You don't like tariffs, you're tolerant of more immigration, you think Putin is an aggressor. But until you...
Well, what do you mean by more tolerance of more immigration? Because I said immigration is way too high and it needs to be brought down. I'm tolerant of us being a, multi-ethnic country. Yes, obviously. I mean, look at the two of us. But that doesn't mean that we should just have unlimited immigration. That's one of the mistakes that we made, which under my leadership, the Conservative Party is fixing. We have new policies on immigration. But yes, definitely on tariffs.
But when you say that you wouldn't have unlimited, I mean, what does that mean? What would you get it down to? Would you buy the policy of net zero immigration, which is kind of where Mr. Trump is?
Well, something needs to be done to bring down the numbers of people coming into our country illegally, violating our laws, certainly our border laws, and also making sure that when people do...
Everybody agrees about that.
Yes, but when people do immigrate into a country, that we take numbers that are sustainable and that allow people to integrate. Right now, we're seeing a huge strain on public services. There's not enough housing. There are not enough GP appointments. Immigration has played a part in this. So it's about making sure that the people who come to our country want to contribute, want to see the success of the UK, and are able to do so in a way that does not come into conflict with our values, and they are not a drain on public resources. Those are the principles that we need.
I don't think anybody's going to disagree with anything you've just said, but let's just talk about... I'm trying to get to what kind of Conservative you are. There are some concerns that you do apparently share with the Trump camp. For example, you're keen on freedom of speech, and you've...
That's a great thing. Freedom of speech is fantastic.
And
I don't think that we should be quibbling freedom of speech in this country. That's one of the reasons why so many people want to come here.
There are arguments about exactly what it is and how you balance it against protection of vulnerable or weak parts of society. You've made it clear that you think that the sending the police to arrest people for messages on WhatsApp is wrong and all of that. Do you think that J.D. Vance is right when he says freedom of speech is in retreat in the United Kingdom?
We have freedom of speech in the United Kingdom. But is it under threat? Yes. I think that we need to make sure that we hold on to our values. Freedom of speech
so he's right.
I don't know what in retreat means. Freedom of speech is something that has always had contentious discussions around it. It's often had limits. You can't shout fire in a crowded theatre. You can't libel people or defame them. You can't just say things that are not true in serious circumstances. But what we are seeing now is people wanting to impose their views on others in certain circumstances. I saw it...
What circumstance?
So, for instance, I remember a lot of the issues that the nurses in Darlington are having with women being sacked from work because they're saying that a man cannot be a woman. That's freedom of speech. They're losing their jobs because of that.
This is a case where 6 nurses complained to their employers that somebody who had who was transsexual but had not had made a medical transition, who's transgender, beg your pardon, was able to use the so-called female changing rooms.
Well, yes, he was a biological male who was using their changing rooms without making any visible transition as far as they were concerned.
Yeah.
They did not want to get...
biologically male was using female
Yes,
paint.
exactly. They did not want to get undressed in front of that man. And yet they're the ones who are now facing losing their jobs. There are many women who've lost their jobs because of that. Is that a free speech issue? Yes, I do think so. But there are laws to protect. It's a shame that so many employers do not understand what the law is and so many people are having to go to court. The problem would be if the courts were ruling in favour of a loss of freedom of speech, which isn't quite happening yet. But we do need to be more strong in defending freedom of speech. Absolutely.
Well, we've seen some examples this week, the police going into a Quaker meeting house, and specifically, the court ruled that Livia Tositi-Bolt broke the law with this one-woman demo outside an abortion clinic, not because of what she said, but because of where she said it. And it's clear that actually that's what the law dictates.
Yeah.
Would you retain that law if you came into power?
So I think that this is one of those laws that came in while I was an MP and I voted against. And the reason why it was not a whip vote is because it had to do with abortion, which is a free vote. Once anything has to do with abortion in Parliament, it tends to be a free vote. But Parliament made that decision. That was the law. I think that on the balance of probabilities, it's probably too strict. But I also
So
don't
you would
think...
get rid of it, if you came into
Let me
power?
finish the point. I also think that we need to be careful about creating a situation where some citizens are able to deliberately harass others in sensitive situations. I think that people should be free to express their opinions. Freedom of speech is one of those values that was brought in to make sure that governments did not impose themselves on individuals. But when it comes to individual, there are now buffer zones.
I fully
but one of the things...
fully understand the trade-off here.
Yeah.
But you know that there is a law, it says what it says, and really what I'm trying to get, you're notoriously straight speaking, would you change that law or would you not?
But I've already told you how I voted on that law. These are things the Parliament...
Well, why didn't you just say, yes, I would
yes,
change it?
Well, but because what I don't want to do is start bringing in the sort of debates that they have in the US, where everybody's arguing about abortion rather than talking about the things that are impacting everyone's lives right now, like the economy. People are losing their jobs. People are getting paid less, businesses are closing. This is what's happening because of decisions that the government is making. We need to make sure that people can, of course, have freedom of speech. The law is there to protect it. I think the law, on balance, is in an all-right area. It's probably, in some places, a bit too strict. That's what's happened in this situation.
All right, let me see if I can get a yes or no on this. Have you decided yet whether you would leave the European Convention on Human Rights if you came into power?
I have said that if we need to leave, we will leave, but we're not just going to make an announcement. Let's look at all of the things that are happening around legislation. And I've said that we are setting up policy commissions to do just that.
So you haven't decided yet, all right. Local elections are looming. What's going to be a good night for the Conservatives?
Well, this is going to be a very challenging set of results for Conservatives. The last time we fought these was 4 years ago. Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. There was a vaccine bounce. We won an unprecedented 2/3 of the vote. No party had ever done that in history. So this is going to be a very tough night. But we are fighting for every vote. And if people look at cities like Birmingham, they can see what happens when you vote Labour. That is a council that is completely collapsed. The council tax people paid last year to get rubbish picked up has not been used to do that. They have higher bills this year. If you want to send a message to Labour, you've got to vote Conservative, because that's way people will understand that that's the only party that can run local councils properly.
You're sounding like a politician now. You're managing my expectations, aren't you? You're saying, you did so well last time that what's going to be a disaster now?
Trevor, let's be real. Let's be real. We just got kicked out of government last year. We have the lowest share of the vote that we've had in any election. We have fewer MPs than even in 1997. The public are still angry. Of course, that's going to be reflected in the local elections. Okay. However, there are many fantastic councillors and very good councils that Conservatives are running, and they are going to be fighting for every vote, because at the end of the day, Conservative councils deliver lower taxes and better services.
I'm only interrupting you because there's something I must show you.
OK.
And I just want you to tell me how you react to this. The Labour Party put out this poster last night.
That's just weird, isn't it? I mean, look at that. It doesn't make any sense.
Says no difference between you and Reform.
I think even just looking at that picture shows that they're trying to make an argument that doesn't work. Of course, there are huge differences between us and Reform. If there weren't, there wouldn't be a Reform party. What I'm saying now is that we need to make sure that local people understand that what they are voting for now is not an opinion poll, but who's going to run their services. And if they vote for anything other than Conservative, they could end up like Birmingham, where there are rats running around and rubbish piling up in the streets.
Thank you. Kemi Badenoch, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Trevor.
Back to Gillian Keegan, Jonathan Ashworth and Caroline Lucas. if I can speak English. Jonathan, I was quite surprised that she displayed some sensitivity on the immigration question, which is not what I was asking her about at all.
Well, she certainly felt under pressure on that, and she wanted to give you an indication that it was an issue that concerned her, but she didn't really want to get drawn into a policy position. And I think this is the problem for her. And I say this as somebody who was a leading shadow cabinet spokesperson on your show and other shows for like 10 years virtually. And it's so difficult at this stage in the Parliament. You come on a show like this, you want to attack the government, but you want to avoid getting drawn on any policy question.
Is that what you were doing all those
I'm now letting you into the secrets of the trade. I'm now pulling the curtain back on what you have to do as an opposition spokesperson. But the problem for her, of course, is that we at Labour Together, which is a think tank I'm involved with, do a lot of polling and focus groups and things like that. And all of our polling and focus groups have her sinking without trace. They don't think she says anything. They never hear from her. And the people who are anti-Labour are looking at Farage. So they're in a real problem at the moment, the Tories.
What do you think, Gillian? I was quite struck also that she seemed to be saying that this balance between defence and welfare, that actually we've got pretty close to a policy position in which a Conservative government under Kemi Badenoch would try to spend more on defence and on welfare.
Yeah, and it's related to the times. I mean, welfare's ballooned and defence, we need more because of the times, what's happening with Ukraine, Russia, and more importantly, Trump's position on those two, where he seems to be kind of abandoning the pitch and hoping that Putin's going to give him a deal, which isn't obviously the position that we would all agree with. So you've got to deal with the times that you find yourself in. And it is very important, I think, that we recognise that. And, trade wars, in the past, nationalism has led to, extreme nationalism has led to wars. You add that to the self-interest and these tariffs and narcissism, and you've got the combo.
Well, look, that combination is not doing very much good business for the Tories under Kemi Badenoch. The Tories are now running, as you see here, third behind Reform. Is that what you would have expected, Caroline?
Well, I think what that shows us is that there is a total lack of confidence and trust in Labour and Conservatives now, and people are looking for alternatives. And I'm very sorry if they end up thinking that Reform is actually going to deliver for them, because I think it's very clear that they are not. They're out for themselves, and they are hardly really the champions of working people that they like to present themselves with. I want to point out, obviously, that on your graph there, you've got the Greens on 9.2%. We had our best ever general election result last time around. Nearly 2 million people voted Green. We've got our 4 Green MPs. Should be a lot more under a fairer voting system, but that's probably a debate for another day.
You agree with Mr. Farage about that.
But
Gillian,
that thing, yeah.
Gillian, on this Reform thing, how worried should the Tories be, taking what Jonathan has said about, let's call it, the Tory leader's relative invisibility? Mr. Farage is always there, and so on. Is there a concern here that, as in other countries, the conventional right is being replaced by this new brand of conservatism?
Well, it's definitely a concern to have had a massive election defeat, which we had, and for the first time have some other party on the right. I mean, to Jonathan's point, Keir Starmer, for the first year or two of his leadership, wasn't really making any impacts. The polls go all over the place. I remember looking into the polls that had Liz Truss at the lead of everything, thinking, why on earth is that? And when you look behind them, they're all over the place, and there's lots of different interests behind them. So I don't take the polls quite... they are there as an input, but they're not going to tell us what's going to happen in 4 years' time. And yes, it is true that there is a wave of nationalism. In some cases, that's extreme nationalism. As I said, that is worrying when you add a lack of free trade to that. And as I said, a dash of narcissism. This is very worrying. But, we're not Reform. We are not, we're not Putin apologists, which they are. And we spend our time in the UK, not at Mar-a-Lago.
I want to talk more about the right later on. We'll do that in the last part of the programme. But next, How will Europe fight back over Donald Trump's tariffs? I'll ask Germany's ambassador to the UK, Miguel Berger.
Over there, to your left. There have been airstrikes every day. Hezbollah are very sensitive about us showing any pictures, and we're being hurried away right now. It felt akin to riding into some sort of Armageddon. Many other areas have been hit badly. There are shells coming in every few minutes. Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city, where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. It's trying to hit us. That's it. It got us then. There's a lot of action going on. A lot of hits coming in still. We were the first journalists and the only outsiders to reach the site of the attack several weeks after it happened.
We found from the missile.
It's very difficult to see what around here could be conceived of as a legitimate military target. Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, a boat seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world. Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Oh! Getting up close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Sky News get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it. Sky News get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
Welcome back. We've been talking about those tariffs from Donald Trump all morning. China's already hit back with reciprocal tariffs, but we're still waiting to see how Europe will respond. Germany's the EU's biggest economy, and Berlin's man in London joins me now, Ambassador Miguel Berger. Morning, Miguel.
Morning.
Should the EU regard it as a compliment that the President of America can't seem to stop talking about how unfair the bloc is and, by implication, how much impact it has on America?
Yeah, you know, it's we could laugh about that, but it's really devastating. I think it's the biggest assault we have seen since the end of the Second World War on global trade. and we all will have to find a way to deal with it. And I must say, we are currently, over the weekend, European trade ministers are talking. They're going to meet on Monday and then take a decision on how to react.
Well, we'll hear on Monday from the EU what it plans to do, do you think?
We might hear a little bit more, but it is already clear that we want to give negotiations some time. So we have decided to react on these tariffs on steel and aluminium till mid-April, but on the massive 20% so-called reciprocal tariff, we want to give negotiations some time, but we are also working out a list of possible reactions. And this is not only about tariffs. So we might look, for example, at services and at other measures, because we always have to take into account that however we react, the end objective of any reaction is to get into negotiations.
So essentially what you're looking forward to or looking ahead at is the EU essentially saying to the Americans, if you do this or if you keep these tariffs on, here are the list of things that we can do and we are prepared to retaliate.
Yes, we are prepared to retaliate. And, the European Union is a market of 450 million people. It's the biggest place of investment of the United States. The trade relation is the biggest in the world. So we have a lot to bring to the table. And as I said, we want to avoid, as the UK and any other country around the world, we want to avoid this trade war. Only to give you some figures. Germany exports 500,000 cars to the US. A third of our chemical industry, pharmaceutical industry. So we would be massively hit. But obviously things are much more complex, because if you look, who is the biggest car exporter in the US? It's BMW. So if we would take countermeasures, we would hurt our automotive industry twice. So what is very important is that people don't only look at the tariffs, but also at the secondary effects. So, for example, what will happen to all the Chinese goods which can't go to the US? They might end up in the British and the European market, and we have to protect ourselves against.
Against dumping.
So, dumping and, a redirection of trade. And we have to take all of this into account.
Would one of the targets for retaliation that would get round all of that be essentially the big American tech firms? Because in a sense, there's no blowback from that, is there?
Yeah, and the US has a big trade advantage on services and on tech. But obviously, with all the countermeasures, you always have to take into account, do you hurt your own consumers and your own economy? That means, are there any other places in the world when you can get the same thing without paying tariffs? So, for example, instead of an Apple iPhone, you can buy a Samsung iPhone, or a phone. So that means that this is something the European Union will take into account.
This sounds like a very cautious reaction, actually, because last week the European Union was rattling the sabres very loudly, but it sounds to me like there's been some second thoughts.
No, there are no second thoughts. As I said, priority to negotiate, find a way forward, maybe even reduce tariffs we have between the United States and the European Union. But if there is no other option, then we will definitely have to react to that.
The Cabinet Minister, Darren Johnson, when he spoke to us this morning, Darren Jones, I beg your pardon, was saying this morning that he thought that the UK could essentially engineer a situation in which it has a deal with the EU and a deal with the United States, both of which are compatible. I put to him the issue of food, particularly chlorinated chicken. Do you think in the end the UK is going to have to make a choice?
It's too early to say, but I think there would also be a backlash in the United Kingdom with chlorinated chicken and genetically manipulated food. So I think it's not only the EU consumers who don't want to have that. I'm pretty sure that the British government will try everything to avoid the necessity of having to take a choice.
Of course, the central issue for the EU right now probably is leadership. In France, we have a president who's got pretty much less than 2 years to go. There are all sorts of issues going on there. And Germany doesn't actually have a government, or it has a lame duck chancellor. When will Germany have a government?
It has a caretaker government, it has a parliament, but no, you're right. So the coalition agreement should be ready after Easter, or even maybe before Easter. And then we are pretty confident that till the end of April we will have a new government. Most likely Friedrich Merz from the Christian Democrats will be the new chancellor in a coalition with the Social Democrats. So we will have very soon a stable German government for the next 4 years.
Well, when you say stable, that's counting without the advance of the AfD. First of all, you're pretty sure that they're not going to be in government, that the firewall will survive. And secondly, are you sure that this is a government that will last for 4 or 5 years, given their advance?
The AfD will be the main opposition party. That is absolutely clear, and they are very strong in Eastern Germany. But the firewall, to your question, yes, it will survive. And I'm very confident that we are going to have a stable government because the tasks are enormous. And we have lifted the debt brake on defense, so we are willing to invest more on defense. We will spend an astonishing sum of 500 billion euros on infrastructure in the next 12 years. So a lot to do for the next government.
Miguel Berger, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Trevor.
Next, we'll speak live to the man who used to be the UK's chief trade negotiator.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film. But it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Well, let's stick with those new tariffs from President Trump. Here, the government hasn't yet responded, but it says that all options remain possible. So what's going on behind the scenes and what could be our response? I'm joined by Sir Crawford Falconer, who was this country's chief trade negotiator until just a few months ago. Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's start with Mr. Trump. What is he actually doing? Are the tariffs a negotiating tactic or do they represent something real?
Look, to be honest, it's not clear. And I suspect that to some degree it's a biddable question. In other words, it's not definitively decided. You know, it is certainly true. If you watch the Rose Garden performance, which was quite extraordinary, the tone of that was that he was making promises to his domestic base that he was going to protect them. He wasn't saying, I'm going to get good deals out of countries. He was saying, I'm going to keep these tariffs on to get you jobs and investment. Now, he may feel that if he does deals, he can still sell that to that base. But certainly the tenor of the presentation would make you a little bit gloomy that they were here to stay. And his chief advisors like Navarro and Lutnick have been out saying, hey, we're not doing deals. Within 24 hours, they were saying, we're not doing deals. But the model of what this president has done in the past is that he is deal obsessed. So it's difficult to say which it is. And of course, my view on these things, being a kind of grimy old trade negotiator, is essentially, well, you test it. You see what it is. You do it without being naive and well aware that it just might not be negotiable, but you have everything to gain by testing it through negotiation. And if you, in that test, and you would judge pretty quickly, believe they're not serious, that these are here to stay, then obviously you have to then go for a different tactic.
Which would be what?
Well, I think it's a question of emphasis. I think you then say there is a long-term question here, which is, can we deal with this not through a traditional negotiation? It's the old story. I mean, what's the first sign of madness? Doing the same thing over and over again when it doesn't succeed the first time. So you don't then go for a genuine negotiation. You go for something which says, well, OK, how can I have a more constrained negotiation with him where we take some lumps, but we don't actually have to put up with the whole thing? That would be where I would say you go next.
So you do sector by sector?
Well, you see if you can section some things off to really satisfy his power base and do a less than perfect deal, which deals with that. And I think that's certainly an option. But, when you go into a negotiation, that's not what you would seek to do, first of all. And I think in any case, but it's a question of emphasis, you need to accelerate your engagement with the rest of the world. You need to therefore work hard with your other trading partners to actually liberalise in areas that have not been able to be liberalised up to now, and with an intensity that hasn't been possible up to now, because I think the rest of the world will be feeling the same thing. So therefore, I think the role of the UK in advancing trade liberalisation with others will become more important. At the moment, you have to put emphasis on the US to see where you are, but I think you then start directing your efforts to finding a way to find other countries to come and join in more liberalising agendas.
So when you say other countries, would that, for example, be the countries of the EU?
There's no reason why it can't include the EU. I mean, we've got a deep trade agreement with the EU. There are certain areas there where you can tidy things up around the corner. The government said it's never going to do a customs union or be part of the single market. But you could work with the EU and encourage the EU to work with us to actually liberalise with other countries collectively. For instance, we are part of an Asia-Pacific trading agreement. Very important with some of the fastest growing economies. So that's I hate to use the acronym, but there you go. That's thanks to Trudeau that we have that acronym. So we should accelerate work with that. And I think we should be encouraging the EU to think about how it could associate with that kind of agreement. At the moment, because of its protectionist position on agriculture, it's very difficult for it to do that. But if it was prepared to be a bit more liberal in some areas, if you had an agreement between the EU and, say, CPTPP, with other members like Indonesia joining, now, you're not going to cause Trump to change his mind overnight, but you're going to have another alternative out there which is more significant and gives you growth possibilities.
That's so interesting. So essentially, you're thinking about the assembly of, if you like, a trading bloc, which is not China, not America, but pretty much the rest of the world.
And working towards it. Yeah, you wouldn't be able to do it overnight, and you wouldn't do it on the basis that you're going to make it an aggressive type of bloc, but it's just like, listen, OK, you want to protect yourself, that's your decision. But the rest of us, we actually want to get on with liberalisation because we believe that's good for all of us. And I think that sends a pretty powerful message, and it's also got commercial benefits for us.
From the point of view of a seasoned negotiator, our government's taken this public stance of not being hostile to the White House, not criticising Mr. Trump in any way, essentially chumming up to them. Didn't spare us from the same treatment as Iran and Afghanistan, and friends like Israel got even worse treatment, as it were, or South Korea at 26%. Is this an administration that you can have a conventional negotiation with?
I think it's a good question, and I don't think it's clear-cut. I mean, yes, we got rebuffed, we got stiffed, OK? But then everybody else got stiffed as well. The Commission clearly went there with some suggestions. Everybody was queuing up with suggestions, and at the end of the day, no, they decided to proceed. So therefore, I certainly don't think you should be working on the assumption that we have some kind of absolutely favoured position. I mean, if we do, that's great. But it seems to me that you would be naive to imagine that the history that was in place is now automatically to be assumed. It will be a hard job to get this administration to get rid of these measures. Remember, it's not just, and I hate to be, piling misery on misery, it's not just that 10% tariff that happened the other evening. I mean, on motor vehicles and steel, it's 25%. We still don't know what the administration intends to do on other sectors. They've said they want to do stuff on pharmaceuticals, they want to do stuff on timber and on other areas. So it may well be there's more than one more shoe to drop on this from their side. So look, having said all that, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter one way or the other. You leverage whatever interests you have to get the best deal you can and to try to negotiate. And I think you still do that, but there comes a point where that is not really going to get you anywhere. So let's see whether that happens sooner or later.
Sir Crawford Falconer, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
In just a moment, we'll hear once again from our panel.
This conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
They want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world.
I'm Deborah Haynes, Sky Security and Defence Editor. I've covered Russia's full-scale war since it began, witnessing the terror and the trauma.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin. Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Martha Kellner, and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Getting the chance to tell people's stories, it's a privilege. I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels.
I'm Dan Whitehead, Sky News' West of England and Wales correspondent. Sky News, get the full story first, free, wherever you get your news.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We start with breaking news.
I am Anna Botting.
It's been quite some day.
The golden age of America begins right now.
A long-awaited ceasefire is now underway.
First question, Sky News.
Congratulations, this is a huge moment.
Describe this feeling. It's incredible.
Now to California.
The Democratic mayor of Los Angeles cut the fire department budget.
Do you owe citizens an apology? Have you nothing to say today?
Jane Secker, Sky News. Would you like to respond to us now?
I've never seen anything like this.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
In principle, would you agree to do that?
Criticism of you, the president, is banned. How is this a fair election?
Historic day here today.
The cameras are poised here, there, everywhere, waiting to see what the president might do next.
I gave you the A+ treatment. Thank you. Thank you all.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Welcome back. We've heard plenty about how the world's been changed by President Trump's tariffs. Quite how far remains to be seen. But it is a stark shift in US policy, even compared to a generation ago. Take a look at this radio address by Ronald Reagan while he was still president in 1987.
You see, at first, when someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. The result is more and more tariffs, higher and higher trade barriers, and less competition. So soon, because of the prices made artificially high by tariffs that subsidize inefficiency and poor management, people stop buying. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs.
Gillian Keegan, Jonathan Ashworth and Caroline Lucas are back with me. Caroline, you couldn't get a more succinct and definitive repudiation than that, could you?
No, that's very true, and it shows how much the Republican Party has changed over the last however many years it was. I think what is important, though, in all of this, and let me say very, very clearly that trade wars serve no one, but I think on a case-by-case basis, if, for example, we're looking at food in this country and we're looking at imports of food products that undercut environmental standards, animal welfare standards, food security standards here, then there can be a case from time to time to be looking at how you're going to try to protect your higher standards from imports that will otherwise undermine them. Otherwise, we're basically giving farmers a kind of a knife to cut their own throat. So we're asking them to increase their environmental standards, but we're allowing them to be undercut by cheaper imports that don't do that. So on a case-by-case basis, I can see some argument for doing that. Clearly, that is not what is happening with Trump, that he's basically got this totally mad algorithm that he's applying, left, right and centre, and it just makes no sense at all.
Gillian, let me put the White House's case. This is what they were elected to do. This is what the American people, by a majority, decided they wanted. And all the clever people who keep rubbishing it are the same people from the big banks and so on who delivered us the 2008 financial crash. So why should we pay any attention to them?
Yeah, and there is a point, he has said, I don't know, whether the American public had that at the front of their mind when they were voting for Trump, but there's certainly, he has said it. I think the implications of things are where, I said before about politicians having to take responsibility. If the implications are the consumer prices go up, inflation comes back again, the size of the economy, some people lose their jobs. That's not what they were led to believe. So if you say, I'm going to do this action and it's going to lead to more jobs in the US, it's going to lead to lower prices, and that is not true, then that's where your two things, what you've promised and actually your actions don't deliver what you promised. So I think that is where the danger is for the Trump administration. And as I said, you know, there'll be a lot of people now, it is very disruptive and there's a lot of people considering what they'll do. But supply chains, it was very refreshing to hear Ronald Reagan. I agree with every word he said. But that was at the very beginning of globalisation. Look where supply chains are now, 30-odd years later. They're so integrated, and many companies will suffer as a result of these, US companies and US consumers, most of all.
Well, Jonathan, at the time Ronald Reagan was making this argument, there were people on the left of the Labour Party who were arguing for tariffs, for protection of British industry, for nationalisation of steel, and so on and so on and so forth. What happened to all of that?
Well, I mean, it just shows you what a topsy-turvy world we're now in, sort of 30 years on from Ronald Reagan. Look, I strongly believe a trade war will be ruinous for the global economy and therefore have huge implications for the UK economy. I can see nothing but trouble ahead on this front. But equally, I think through globalisation, we have spent the last 20 years relying on cheap imports from China, for example, and allowing our own manufacturing base to wither away. So we're going to have to take some tough decisions. We're going to have to be more interventionist as an economy in supporting industry. But let's be clear, this is going to put up prices and it's going to snuffle out competition, which in the end is never good for the consumer.
I just wanted to bring in the global south, the countries in the global south that haven't been anywhere in this discussion, it feels to me. But first of all, we can see that there are huge tariffs that are going to hit places like Cambodia, for example.
60 countries, they think, could be in extreme poverty.
I mean, that's going to really make a huge difference. But let's also be clear, though, that the kind of dog-eat-dog type of economic globalisation hasn't been good for them either, in the sense that their own domestic infant industries have been undermined by imports that they've had to take under these trade agreements to basically have reciprocal trade with countries like the UK or the US. So I think this could be a moment for a real rethink of our whole global trade system. How do we make it work for all of us? Because right now it certainly isn't working for developing countries, and under these tariffs it's going to get even worse.
Before we end, it's not often that I get to make this invitation to panellists, but Jonathan, you're supposed to get your kit off now, aren't you?
I'm not going to do Superman and rip my shirt off, but I am about to run a half marathon for a charity that I do a lot of work for, Children of Alcoholics charity. So I'm actually sat here in my shorts and my running kit under my shirt.
See them.
And I'm about to go and run a half marathon to support children of alcoholics, which is a cause very close to my heart.
Good for you.
He's been stretching his hammies while we've been sitting here. Thank you all very much. That's it for this week's show. I'll be back next Sunday. Sophie is on at 7 o'clock every night this week with more politics. See you next week.